What if the story of Noah's Ark isn't just a moral tale you've heard since childhood, but a coded memory of something far bigger? A real flood, a real place, and maybe a technology we don't fully understand. If you've ever struggled to believe how one ark could save all life, or felt there must be more behind this ancient story, you're not alone. Today, we're diving into shocking evidence-forgotten texts, and a possibility that could change how you see humanity's origins forever. I want you to imagine standing more than 7,000 feet above sea level in a cold, quiet stretch of eastern Turkey. No crowds, no cities, just windrock and silence. Now imagine realizing that you might be standing where human history restarted. That's the question that pulled an American explorer named David Allen Deal into this remote place back in 1997. And honestly, it's the same question that keeps pulling us back to the story of Noah. Deal wasn't chasing myths for fun. He was searching for something real. And what he found near the Anatolian plateau stopped him in his tracks, the ruins of an ancient settlement called Naxuan. The name itself comes from an ancient word meaning Noah's Zion, the city of God, the place Noah is said to have built after the flood. When I first heard that, I remember thinking names don't survive thousands of years by accident. People don't protect words unless they matter. What makes this even more unsettling is the location. Mount Ararat, the legendary resting place of the Ark, is right there. Close enough that you can't ignore the connection. Ancient Armenian historian Moses of Corinth described this exact region as the place of first descent, where Noah and his family came out of the Ark and built the first city after the flood. If that's true, then this isn't just another ancient ruin. This could be ground zero for the post-flood world. And here's where it gets personal for me. I grew up hearing flood stories as distant symbolic lessons, nice stories but far removed from real life. Yet the older I get, the more I realize how often humanity resets itself. Wars, pandemics, collapses. Every generation thinks it's immune until it isn't. That's why places like Naxuan feel uncomfortably familiar. They remind us that survival has always come with a cost. According to researchers, this region may contain hundreds of thousands, possibly up to 1 million graves. Let that sink in. People from across the ancient world may have traveled here for 10,000 years just to bury their dead. Why? Because they believed that resting near Noah, the man chosen to survive the deluge, meant resurrection, renewal, and divine favor. Whether you believe that spiritually or not emotionally, it makes sense. When people feel lost, they cling to places of hope. If Noah really lived here, if he really died here, then this land isn't just sacred, it's central. And if this was the place where humanity began again, then logic demands something else must be nearby. The Ark itself. The book of Genesis describes God commanding Noah to build a vessel unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. About 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. For perspective, ships of that size didn't appear again until the 19th century. That detail has always bothered me in a good way. Because exaggerations usually go big emotionally, not precisely. Measurements feel like engineering, not myth. In 2009, a Dutch builder named Johan Huybers decided to test that description. He built a full-scale ark using biblical dimensions. It took 3 years and over $1 million. The result? A vessel incredibly stable in storms, structurally sound. But there was a problem, one that many of us have quietly wondered about since childhood. How could it possibly hold 2 of every animal on Earth? Let's be honest. If you've ever tried packing for a family vacation, you know space disappears fast. Now multiply that by thousands of species. Ancient astronaut theorists argue what many people are afraid to say out loud: maybe the Ark wasn't meant to carry living animals at all. What if it carried information? Think about where we are today. We preserve seeds in underground vaults. We freeze genetic material. We back up entire lives into digital storage. Because we know one thing for sure: disaster is not a question of if, but when. So here's the uncomfortable question. If we do this now, why wouldn't an advanced intelligence, human or otherwise, do the same thousands of years ago? This is where the idea shifts. What if the Ark was a kind of DNA bank? A vessel designed not to transport animals, but to preserve the genetic blueprint of life itself, animal, plant, even human. Suddenly the story doesn't sound childish anymore. It sounds strategic. And if that's true, then the flood wasn't just destruction. It was a controlled reset. But that raises an even more disturbing question. Who designed that reset? And why was Noah chosen to carry it out? That's where the story gets much stranger and much more personal. When you step away from the ark for a moment, the next question almost asks itself, did a flood like this really happen? Not symbolically, not metaphorically, but physically, water swallowing land cities, disappearing lives, erased. Because if there was no real flood, then the rest of the story collapses. But if there was, then suddenly, Noah stops feeling legendary and starts feeling historical. In September of 2000, marine archaeologist Robert Ballard, yes, the same man who found the Titanic, turned his attention to the Black Sea. What his team discovered there was unsettling. More than 300 feet underwater, they found what appeared to be an ancient dwelling, a structure that had no business being submerged. Carbon dating placed it at roughly 7,500 years old. Here's the thing that hit me hardest when I first learned about this. Nobody builds houses underwater. Villages don't sink themselves. Something forces them under. Ballard and his colleagues proposed that the Black Sea was once much smaller, more like a freshwater lake. Then at some point, rising ocean levels caused the Mediterranean to break through a natural land barrier. When it happened, it wasn't gentle. It was catastrophic. Water rushed in with unimaginable force, flooding tens of thousands of square miles. Some estimates say over 58,000, burying entire communities under hundreds of feet of water. If you've ever watched footage of modern floods, cars floating, homes torn apart, you already know how powerless humans are against water. Now imagine that kind of destruction, but with no warning systems, no evacuation plans, no technology. Just people watching the horizon disappear. What makes this even harder to ignore is that the timing lines up disturbingly well with the biblical flood timeline. And not just the Bible. Ancient Mesopotamian tablets, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Hindu texts, Chinese legends, indigenous stories from the Americas, more than 1,000 flood myths exist across cultures that never contacted each other. That's not coincidence. That's memory. I think about how my grandparents used to talk about war, not dates, not strategies, just feelings. Fear, loss, confusion. Trauma gets passed down, even when details fade. Now imagine a flood so massive it reshaped coastlines and erased civilizations. Of course humanity would remember it. Of course the stories would survive. The book of Genesis says God saw that humanity had become corrupt and violent, and the flood was sent to cleanse the earth. Only Noah, described as righteous and pure in his generations, was chosen to survive. But that phrase, pure in his generations, has always been strangely specific. Why mention genetics at all? Ancient astronaut theorists believe that line isn't poetic. They argue it's technical. According to this view, the flood wasn't simply about moral failure, it was about biological corruption. Something had gone wrong with humanity itself, and Noah wasn't chosen just because he behaved well, but because his lineage was unaltered, preserved. This idea becomes even stranger when we look at ancient texts outside the traditional Bible. In the Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text not included in most modern Bibles, the flood story changes dramatically. Instead of God acting alone, angels are involved. Specifically, an angel named Uriel is the one who warns Noah, not God. Uriel explains what's coming and tells Noah how to survive it. That detail matters, because it shifts the story from divine punishment to intervention. The Book of Enoch describes rebellious beings called Watchers, who interfered with humanity, producing hybrid offspring known as the Nephilim. These beings are described as violent, destructive, and unnatural. According to Enoch, the flood wasn't meant to punish humans, it was meant to remove them. When I first read that, I remember feeling uncomfortable, not because it sounded ridiculous, but because it sounded disturbingly organized, like a reset button being pressed to fix a system that had gone wrong. And here's where the Ark returns to the story in a new light. If the flood was meant to wipe the slate clean, then preserving life wouldn't mean saving every individual, it would mean saving the blueprint. DNA information, potential. That would explain why the Ark didn't need to be impossibly large. It wouldn't need cages. It would need storage. Modern science already does this. We store seeds in Arctic vaults, We preserve genetic material in frozen labs. We back up life because we understand fragility. The only difference is, we admit it openly. Ancient people encoded it into story. So what if Noah wasn't just a shipbuilder? What if he was a caretaker of something far more valuable than animals? What if he was trusted to carry the future of life itself through a planned catastrophe? And if that's true, then the flood wasn't chaos. It was control. But that leads to the most unsettling question of all: who was really in control? Because once you start asking that, you're no longer just questioning the flood. You're questioning humanity's origin story itself. If the flood was controlled and the ark was designed to preserve life at the genetic level, then the next question becomes unavoidable: who exactly was Noah? Because the deeper you go into the ancient texts, the harder it is to see him as just a random farmer who happened to be obedient. The Bible tells us Noah was pure in his generations. That phrase appears in the book of Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. For years I skimmed past it like most people do. It sounds spiritual, clean, moral. But the wording is oddly specific. It doesn't just say Noah was righteous. It says his lineage was pure. And lineage isn't about behavior. It's about bloodlines. This is where the Dead Sea Scrolls enter the picture and where the story takes a sharp turn. Among those ancient writings is a text often called the Lamech Scroll. Lamech was Noah's father, and according to this account, when Noah was born, something was clearly wrong, or at least very different. Lamech looks at his newborn son and panics. The child's appearance is described as unnatural, radiant, almost glowing. Lamech becomes convinced that the child is not his. Imagine that moment. Any parent who's ever worried about their child being different can feel that fear. The sense that something is out of your control. Lamech confronts his wife Batanosh, accusing her of betrayal. She swears that no man touched her. Desperate for answers, Lamech turns to his father Methuselah. Methuselah, equally disturbed, goes even further to his own father Enoch. And Enoch's answer changes everything. According to the text, Enoch explains that Noah's conception was not human. He tells Methuselah that the watchers of the sky intervened, that Noah was the result of a deliberate act, what we would today call artificial insemination. Not an accident, not a scandal, a plan. And here's the line that stuck with me the most. Enoch says the child must be accepted because he will become the father of a new humanity. If that sounds unsettling, it should, because this isn't mythology written for comfort. It reads like a technical explanation wrapped in ancient language. Ancient astronaut theorists interpret the Watchers not as angels in the modern religious sense, but as non-human intelligences, beings with advanced knowledge who interfered with human development. In this view, Noah wasn't just chosen because he was good. He was chosen because he was engineered. Now, before dismissing that, think about something very real. We already edit genes. We already select embryos. We already talk about eliminating disease before birth. If humanity can do this within a few decades of modern science, what could a far older, more advanced intelligence accomplish? The theory suggests that humanity had been altered before the flood corrupted biologically, not just morally. Hybridization, degradation, something that threatened the future of the species. And Noah, being genetically pure, became the reset point. That's why his bloodline mattered. That's why his family mattered. That's why only his family was preserved. And suddenly the flood stops feeling like a tantrum from a wrathful deity and starts feeling like a containment operation. The Book of Enoch describes the flood washing away not sinful humans, but rebellious beings, the Watchers and their offspring, the Nephilim. In this version, God, or whatever authority stands behind the operation, is protecting humanity, not punishing it. I'll be honest. That interpretation bothered me at first, because it removes the comfort of simple morality. It suggests we're part of something far more complex, managed, guided, maybe even corrected. But then I thought about everyday life. Think about when a system breaks a computer, a city, even a relationship. Sometimes you don't fix it by patching the surface. Sometimes you have to shut it down and rebuild from the foundation. That process always looks brutal from the inside. If Noah was designed to restart humanity, that would explain why ancient texts emphasize his uniqueness, why his birth was strange, why his lineage mattered more than his resume. It would also explain why the ark wasn't just a boat. It was a safeguard, a bridge between what humanity was and what it was supposed to become. And that brings us to an uncomfortable realization. If Noah was chosen not just for obedience but for biological purity, then the flood wasn't the end of interference. It was part of a long-term plan, a plan that may not have ended thousands of years ago. Because once you accept that humanity has been guided before, you have to ask whether it's still happening now. By the time you reach this point in the story, it becomes harder to dismiss Noah as an isolated figure. Because once you step back, something unsettling comes into focus. The flood story doesn't belong to one culture, one religion, or one region. It belongs to everyone. And that raises a question we don't like to ask: why do civilizations separated by oceans, languages, and thousands of years all remember the same disaster? The Hebrew Bible tells the story in Genesis chapters 6 through 9. But the Islamic Quran tells it too. So do ancient Sumerian texts carved into clay, most famously the Epic of Gilgamesh. In that story, angry gods send a massive flood to erase humanity, while a chosen man is warned in advance and told to build a vessel to survive. Different names, same plot. Even more fascinating are the flood stories from cultures that had no contact with the Middle East. Indigenous tribes in the Americas speak of a world drowned by water. Ancient Chinese legends describe a great deluge that destroyed early kingdoms. Hindu texts tell of Manu warned by a divine being to build a boat and save life from an incoming flood. When you line them up, the similarities are impossible to ignore. A warning, a chosen survivor, a vessel, a reset. Skeptics often say this is just human imagination repeating itself. But that explanation feels weak. Humans don't independently invent the same disaster with the same structure unless something real happened. Shared memory doesn't require shared language, only shared trauma. Think about modern history. Events like world wars or pandemics don't stay local. Their echoes spread. They change how people think, how stories are told, how fears are passed down. Now imagine a catastrophe so vast it reshaped the entire planet. Of course, it would leave fingerprints everywhere. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. Some ancient astronaut theorists argue that the flood wasn't purely natural at all. They suggest it may have been engineered, not by gods in the poetic sense, but by advanced beings capable of manipulating weather, oceans, and geology. At first, that sounds extreme, until you consider one uncomfortable fact: we are already experimenting with weather modification, cloud seeding, climate engineering, geoengineering proposals that openly discuss altering global systems. If humans can do this at the early stages of technology, what could a civilization thousands or millions of years ahead of us achieve? The theory goes like this: humanity reached a point of instability, biological corruption, social chaos, genetic degradation. Rather than letting the system collapse completely, a reset was initiated. The flood was the tool. Noah was the anchor point. Life was preserved selectively. In this view, the Ark wasn't a rescue boat, it was a fail-safe. That idea becomes even more unsettling when we return to the Book of Enoch. Unlike Genesis, Enoch doesn't portray the flood as an act of rage. It describes it as necessary, protective, a way to remove destructive influences while preserving what could still be saved. One of the most striking differences is who gives Noah the warning. In Genesis, it's God. In Enoch, it's the archangel Uriel. That detail shifts authority. It suggests layers, a hierarchy of beings carrying out a directive. And if that's true, then the flood wasn't divine emotion. It was administration. I remember once having to wipe a hard drive that held years of work. Photos, documents, memories. It felt brutal, but the system was corrupted beyond repair. Resetting it was the only way forward. From the outside, it looked destructive. From the inside, it was survival. That analogy helped me understand why flood stories often describe both devastation and mercy. Why the same event is remembered as punishment in one culture and protection in another. It depends on where you stood when the waters rose. What's even harder to ignore is how flood myths are often paired with stories of powerful beings, angels, gods, sky watchers who guide or warn humanity. Graham Hancock and other researchers point out that alongside memories of global destruction, ancient cultures also remembered teachers, figures who appeared after the catastrophe bringing knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and civilization. That suggests continuity, not extinction. If advanced beings intervened once teaching humanity how to restart, then the flood wasn't the end of the relationship, it was a transition. And that leads to a question that feels uncomfortably modern. If humanity was reset once because it became unstable, what happens when we reach that point again? Because today, we're altering DNA, weaponizing climate, pushing technology faster than wisdom, creating systems we barely control. The flood myth refuses to die because it may not be about the past. It may be a warning. And if that warning was encoded into stories across the world, then Noah's Ark isn't just history. It's a message we may be approaching faster than we realize. When all the theories are laid out, ancient texts, global flood myths, genetic language, engineered survival, what remains isn't just a mystery about the past, it's a question about us. Because the story of Noah doesn't end when the waters recede. It begins when humanity steps back onto dry land and is told to rebuild. In the book of Genesis, chapter 9, God makes a covenant with Noah, a promise. The flood will not happen again in the same way. Life is given another chance. And the symbol of that promise, the rainbow, isn't just reassurance, it's a reminder, a line drawn between destruction and responsibility. But here's what we rarely talk about. After the flood, humanity doesn't suddenly become perfect. Violence returns, pride returns, corruption returns, which tells us something important. The reset wasn't about creating flawless beings. It was about preserving potential. Noah wasn't chosen to save a perfect world. He was chosen to save the possibility of a better one. That distinction matters, because if the ark was a vessel of preservation, whether literal, symbolic, or technological, then its real cargo wasn't animals or DNA alone. It was choice. The chance to do things differently. I think about that a lot when I look at the world today. We have more knowledge than any civilization before us. More power, more reach. And yet we're still struggling with the same patterns: greed, division, exploitation. Different tools, same impulses. Ancient astronaut theorists argue that if advanced beings intervened once, they may still be watching. Not controlling every action, but observing outcomes. Waiting to see whether humanity learns or repeats. That idea makes some people uncomfortable, but personally I find it grounding, because it reframes the story from fear to accountability. It says you were given another chance, what will you do with it? Even the ark itself reflects that mindset. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't fast, it wasn't a weapon. It was a container, a shelter, something designed not to conquer nature but to endure it, to float through chaos without becoming part of it. That feels like a lesson we've forgotten. In modern life, we're obsessed with speed, growth, expansion. We build systems that move faster than our ethics can keep up with. And when cracks appear, we patch them instead of asking whether the foundation is sound. The flood myth warns us what happens when imbalance goes unchecked. Across cultures, the flood is always followed by law, structure, and guidance. After the waters fall, rules are established. Boundaries are drawn. Humanity is reminded that survival comes with responsibility to the earth, to each other, and to whatever greater order exists beyond us. And maybe that's why the story of Noah refuses to fade. Because it speaks to a cycle we keep repeating. Creation, corruption, correction, continuation. If the ancient texts are even partially true, then Noah stands at the intersection of human choice and external intervention. A man caught between worlds before and after, guided but not controlled, preserved but not exalted. He wasn't worshipped, he was trusted. That might be the most important detail of all, because trust implies risk. It means whoever intervened, God, angels, advanced beings, or forces we don't yet understand, believed humanity was worth saving, even knowing we might fail again. That belief places the responsibility back on us. The ark isn't waiting on a mountain anymore. There's no flood on the horizon, at least not yet. But the pressures are building. Environmental collapse, genetic manipulation, artificial intelligence, weapons that can reshape the planet, different waters, same test. The story of Noah asks one final question, and it's not about the past. It's about the future. If we are given knowledge without wisdom, power without restraint, and survival without humility, Do we become the generation that justifies another reset? Or do we finally learn? Because if the Ark was a message carried through time, then its meaning is clear. Preservation is not salvation. What we do after the storm is what decides everything. So whether you see Noah's Ark as history symbol or something far more advanced, one truth keeps surfacing. Humanity has been given chances before, and what matters most is what we do after the storm. These ancient stories aren't just about survival, they're about responsibility, wisdom, and choice. If this journey made you think, question, or see the world a little differently, you're not alone here. Feel free to like the video, subscribe, and stay with us. We've got many more stories like this to explore together.